This episode is brought to you by Chaos Labs, one of the leading on-chain risk management firms. You'll be hearing more from them later in the show. This episode is brought to you by Ledger, the most secure hardware wallet trusted by 7 million users and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. We'll be hearing more from them later in the show. This episode is brought to you by Renaud Partners, the premier go-to-market advisory firm for early-stage crypto teams. Thanks to them for making this episode possible. If you like the Lightspeed podcast, then you need to subscribe to the Lightspeed newsletter, written by a team including yours truly and delivered to your email inbox daily. Lightspeed is your essential daily briefing on all things Solana. Exclusive news, deep analysis, and the latest trends delivered in a way that's digestible and, I think, sometimes kind of funny. Stay ahead of the curve with the same insights that guide readers from Brevin Howard, Gemini, Jito, CME Group, Solana Labs, and Foundation, and many more. The link to sign up can be found in today's show notes or if you go to blockworks.co. Subscribe to the Lightspeed newsletter today. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. I'm your host, Jack Kubanek, alongside Mert Mumtaz, and we are very lucky to be joined today by Raj, the co-founder of Solana. Raj, you've done quite a few podcasts in your time, but I think this is your first time on Lightspeed, the best Solana podcast of them all. So welcome to the show. It's good to have you on.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Super excited. Sorry it took so long to schedule.
Good to have you on, especially kind of at the end of a really banner year, or I guess I should say on the precipice of what could be a really key year in crypto. And that's sort of where I want to start, actually, Raj, is there's a lot of podcast episodes out there of you telling the story of how you met Anatoly and founded Solana and all these things. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but I just want to go the opposite direction for a second. It's the end of 2024 right now. It's looking like 2025 could be a year where, for the first time, US regulators really open up towards crypto. You've been, kind of writing and tweeting a bit about what crypto in the US could look like. So I'm just curious to ask, as we look into 2025, what's top of mind as far as what you want to create and work on and what you hope to see coming out of the Solana world?
Just to start, I'll say I'm really excited by the the regulatory environment in the US. I'm really optimistic. I'm really bullish. And just like a number of things, I think there was an idea of what would probably happen and what the environment would look like, but I didn't know if it was going to take 20 years, 50 years. It's the same thing when we started Solana. There was a question of when will anyone need this kind of throughput on a blockchain? Is it going to be 20 years from now or 50 years from now or 2 years from now? It's anybody's game or anybody's guess. And I think what I keep finding with crypto, and this is what I love about it, is that the future keeps coming faster than we expected. We end up in that kind of that ideal outcome of faster adoption, at least from my perspective. I think we've seen a lot faster adoption. COVID and lockdowns really accelerated things, and faster adjustment of the U.S. regulatory environment to be crypto friendly. And I think why that's important is, I think we still have some of the best developers in the U.S. We have there's a very intense early adopter mindset amongst consumers in the U.S. As the U.S. goes, often so does the rest of the world. And I think there's a level of legitimacy and acceptance that happens when when something is ready for prime time in the U.S. I look back at startup waves like what happened with Uber in the 2010s and late 2000s, Airbnb, PayPal. I think these things happen so fast once you hit that tipping point, and they all started in the U.S. and blitzscale was absolutely part of their strategy. So I think that's kind of the crux of it for me. I think global blitzscaling is important for crypto. because anything that slows down the adoption of the space creates more time for incumbents to put their claws in. And incumbents are state actors that want to protect their monopoly on money. It's giant bank cartels that want to protect their monopoly on financial services. It's exchanges that want to protect their monopoly on trading. And I think blitzscaling permissionless self-custody crypto is the thing that I care most about, and the US is a really critical part of that.
There's a few things that I want to get into, but one that I want to pull out is what you mentioned about the developer talent in the US and opening that up potentially. And, I was at Solana Boston a couple months ago, which was held on MIT's campus. And I was chatting with a couple of MIT students that were there. And they were mentioning, like, yeah, there's maybe one crypto kid per grade, or there's two crypto kids per class at this, really elite kind of tech school. And it's a problem that a few kind of US based founders or investors have talked to me about, where it's hard to get the kind of top tier of talent in the US to want to take jobs in crypto. And I'm just curious to get your take on this because, Raj, I believe you went to Wharton. You kind of come out of that environment. You did a lot of Silicon Valley stuff and raised. Obviously, you had to hire for Solana and find developers in the US when you were first establishing it. So, in your view, what does it look like to tap into the US talent pool and get some of these new college grads to want to work in crypto?
I think the best catalyst is just successful products. Everything. It used to be stigmatized to work in tech at all. It was only a field relegated to like neckbeardy nerds that didn't have any social skills. And I think after the dot-com boom and bust and some of the, really life-changing transformative products that got built. And then I think for a lot of people, like watching The Social Network and seeing the rise of social media, it became a lot sexier and it became the field to go into instead of finance and consulting. And I think the same thing. One thing I love about crypto is it's sort of like tech within tech. It's like the counterculture within the counterculture. What tech used to be as a counterculture and kind of a controversial choice, now crypto is that controversial choice within tech. I think it's really just going to be a few products, the same way that Facebook and Amazon and Netflix were those products that touched people's lives and made it really mainstream and acceptable and prestigious to work in tech. I think we're on the cusp really of the same thing in crypto. We definitely had a few setbacks with really large public failures and systemic risks that played out in the wrong way. But I think, I already see and feel the tides shifting. We're getting so much more inbound from insanely high quality applicants. We're generally not hiring, but I think that's a good leading indicator.
Something you alluded to there and that you've spoken about on other podcasts is that specifically as to Solana, it had this involvement with FTX where the exchange kind of chose Solana as its chain to build Serum. It was a very early adopter. And you spoke, I forget how recently this was, but about how for a while it was hard to do any kind of public appearance or talk about Solana without FTX being the first sentence or the first question that you get. So I'm curious, like, as far as shaking that reputation, how long did it take before things swung around and the focus on Solana shifted to other things? Because it doesn't seem like at this point people think about Solana and they think about FTX and make that association so much anymore.
I think a year is about as long as anything, any perception or narrative lasts in crypto. Um, we kind of knew it in late 2022. Um, we had never seen anything really last longer than a year and be the main topic of conversation. Um, Solana started as a VC chain. That was kind of the narrative put on it. it was a ghost chain. There was nothing happening on it. It was vaporware. It's gone through so many different, you know, uh, critical identities and labels. And yeah, sure enough, I think about a year after late 2022, we just saw a ton of other use cases on the network, and I think the narrative was kind of dead. I think looking forward, I'm excited. This is one of the things I talked about recently. Just I think where we go from here is like it's you don't have a reactive identity to something negative that's happening on the network or a competitor. I think Solana's kind of on the cusp of finding its own unique identity, and for that to be the primary kind of topic of conversation. Um, what I what I think it resembles most closely in terms of like where that vision and that culture lie. I think when I saw like the whole effective acceleration kind of movement happen. Just that word acceleration and accelerationism, I think, is something that's like very it's a common thread in everybody that gravitates towards Solana. They want to see the future accelerate and get closer to us faster. And there's no limit. Like there's no limit to how much they want to just sort of increase the pace of progress and innovation. And I think more tactically, it all comes back to where Toli's focus is and where his focus was when we started the project, which is, increasing bandwidth and reducing latency. It's literally been the same thing from the beginning. And that's all about acceleration. So I think, I think you guys do important work. I think finding those memes and figuring out what the identity of the network is without the framing of a reaction to something, in the past is really important.
Chaos Labs, the leading on-chain risk management firm, recently launched its new flagship Oracle product, Edge, which delivers integrated, high-precision risk and price data for any on-chain application with a market. Edge emerged from stealth after 2 months, securing Jupiter, the top swap platform on Solana, already securing $30 billion in volume and more than 60% of all Solana perps volume. Edge is comprised of 3 components: price, risk, and proofs. It delivers high-precision price data with an integrated risk engine powered by Chaos's advanced outlier and anomaly detection algorithm. It automates delivery of real-time parameter adjustments on-chain based on current market conditions, and it enables the secure on-chain delivery of custom data points, including reserve attestations delivered via ZKPs. Most recently, Wintermute announced its selection of the Edge Proofs Oracle for Outcome Market, its new smart contract-based election prediction market tool. Thank you to Chaos Labs for making this episode possible. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger remains the most secure hardware wallet for your Solana and logins, trusted by 7 million users and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. In recent years, Ledger has built a robust ecosystem of products and services, making digital ownership more secure and accessible to everyone. Ledger's newest devices, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, feature the world's first secure touchscreens, making it easier and safer to manage your Solana transactions and coins. With Ledger Live, you can seamlessly and securely manage and stake your SOL. Alongside Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, Ledger introduced the Ledger Security Key app, a safer alternative to traditional passwords, enhancing your overall digital security. During Black Friday, upgrade to Ledger Flex and get $70 in Bitcoin. Plus, save up to 40% on select Ledger Nano wallets and accessories. Hurry, because these offers are valid until December 5th while supplies last. Everybody knows there's a massive shortage of top senior marketers in crypto, and teams are constantly struggling to get their go-to-market done right. Renaud Partners is the premier go-to-market advisory firm for early-stage crypto teams. They help top founders tell their stories better and build great non-technical teams. They advise founders on all things marketing, tight brand positioning, community building, social media, and building A+ internal teams. They work with some of the top projects across Solana, Monad, Ton, Base, and others. Renaud Partners has built the most elite network of native crypto marketers globally. They create custom expert teams to support founders with transformative strategy work. Some of the best founders, VC firms, and ecosystem leaders in the business trust Renaud Partners to help their teams expedite their marketing success and catalyze their growth. If you're a founder or a VC looking for support for your teams, I highly recommend connecting with them. You can learn more at renaudpartners.com.
Has increased bandwidth, reduced latency been Toli's thing for a while? Because we recently made it into a meme because I think he just tweets it more. And I made that website, solanaroadmap.com, just to troll everybody for reasons I won't get into. But was that always his thing internally? We just didn't see it?
Absolutely. I think, Mert, you've done this a couple of times now. We'll see if you can make it a hat trick in the next, in the next few years. But like, if you remember, Only Possible on Solana, you crystallized it into, those specific words repeated until other people repeated them. But the idea that, we were only really interested in finding use cases and products and founders that had visions for things that were newly possible with the performance of Solana was something that traces back to when we were first looking for the very first developers to use the network. What we found was there were a ton of people that wanted to use it to try and get a grant or tell some story or just put another logo on their website and raise money against it. And all the other reasons besides I have a product vision that's newly possible with this kind of performance were just like wastes of time. But it took years for that cultural kind of value to crystallize into those words of only possible on Solana and Opus. I think it's the same thing with increased bandwidth, reduced latency. It was never that crystallized, but we've definitely hit like the inflection point. Everyone knows those words. They know the letters. The website is memeable. I get asked about it everywhere I go. I love that about, I think about crypto, about tech and about this community, just the, that constant kind of search for what are the most simple, easy to communicate values that we ascribe to, and how do we shout from the mountaintops until we collect the world's best people to work towards them.
Something interesting you said there is about the early days when teams or developers would just want to put Solana as their logo and say, hey, we're working with these guys and get a grant. And this seems to be very common in crypto still today. And Solana has been, in my experience, quite unlike that, where it's much more about the mission and kind of the words we come to describe the mission. I guess my question, if we are to go back, what has been your vision for Solana such that has always been kind of part of Solana from the beginning? Like, what do you, or maybe a better way to, more philosophical way to put it is like, what gets you out of bed to work on this stuff?
For me, startups were never about, having a cool project that makes some money or any kind of like short-term focus. For me, it's about making a brand and a machine for allocating resources that's going to outlive you and outlive your children, like something that really endures. And to have something that really endures, you can't get distracted. Like you have to find a level of focus that makes, I think Steve Jobs used to say this, like you want to say no to 99 ideas that sound incredibly good, like that you really want to say yes to, before you say yes to the one that you actually pursue. And I think this is a lot of what we reacted to when we came into the crypto industry. Was it seemed really easy to make $5 or $10 million by going into like the white paper industrial complex and making the Telegram group and saying yes to a bunch of people that said they could promote your project and getting the right 5 or 10 investors on board, and having them market the project, and you launch a token and you sell it, and it just seemed like that was kind of the entire industry's focus, was like playing that game as effectively as they could. And to me, it's a tragedy. There's so many great minds that get wasted with that. I think we're still there. There's a lot of really dressed up projects that are really just part of that old white paper industrial complex kind of game. And in that way, I think Solana still is this reaction to this very I think kind of dystopian version of what crypto could have ended up being, where it's just it's always focused on the illusion of innovation for short term game. So yeah, I mean, I think for us, saying no to things like KOLs that packaged up their promotion services, and finding our truth, which was, let's start a Telegram group where all the engineering discussions are just had in public in front of everyone, and if people find these engineering questions to be interesting, they will naturally like gravitate toward us, and we're okay with having 1/100th of the audience that every other project has, as long as it's the right audience. I think it's the same discipline kind of translated over to the developers that we wanted to attract. It really, there's like 1 out of 100 that had a product vision that wasn't some derivative of something already happening on Ethereum. It wasn't something that was possible on other networks. They really had a burning vision and a problem they wanted to solve. One of the canonical examples was on-chain central limit order books. Like, we talked to a bunch of people that kind of resonated with that vision of every bid, ask, and cancel being an on-chain transaction, and you can't have front running and queue jumping, and that's clearly like a product vision that was only possible when Solana's performance was brought to the market. But I think folks like the Helium team as well. It's just very clear that they had a problem they're trying to solve. They have a product vision. It's very aggressive, and it's only possible with Solana's performance. So, really happy that we ended up kind of finding that truth for ourselves. That these are the builders we wanted, even if it was like 1/100th of the raw numbers of any other network, because obviously that's what's now grown into this really powerful and large developer network on Solana, and it's kind of it's like a DNA and a cultural kind of identity that is sort of dripping from everything about Solana. You just you really it's very visceral and very resonant.
I think one of the most underrated aspects of the Solana story is the quality of the people that have been there since the beginning, in a sense. And I believe I saw you talk about this in a different interview where you were talking about how think of the most impossible person to recruit, who that person is, and kind of go after them. Or you said that was kind of your mentality. I'm paraphrasing. I might be slightly wrong on how I'm saying that. But so, for example, obviously, the core team of Solana from the beginning has been super strong. But also Solana Foundation, right? Folks like Lily, Akshay, and then also just ecosystem teams that are core, right? Like Jito, et cetera, all have been super strong. And so what do you look for when you are, and one thing that I'll just say that goes without saying here is that that's largely in thanks to Raj's efforts. And so what do you look for when you're recruiting top talent? Tell us the secrets.
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I did everything I could to bring in amazing people, but if it wasn't for Toli, there's no Solana. None of this happens. Right? It was I think starting with incredibly disciplined, incredibly thoughtful, incredibly first principles thinking engineering talent. If the thing you're doing is engineering, is like absolutely critical. And the people who are not engineers, they might not understand anything about how the engineering side works, but they know what greatness looks like, and they know what it doesn't look like. And I think starting with just supporting Anatoly and choosing Anatoly as a person that I wanted to throw everything I had behind was probably the most important decision. Past that, I mean, I think there's a number of functions that we hired for, but I would just say like the number one thing that I always optimized for was winning the impossible candidates. So this is probably there's a set of stories I could speak to, and Mert, it sounds like you've heard a few of them, but uh, you know, having the list of people and not just putting out a job rec and seeing who applies, I think that's the crux of it. Before you ever even decide what a role looks like, what the job responsibilities are, what type of qualifications you're looking for in the candidates. I think just sitting down and almost just meditating and seeing like who comes to mind in all of your past history. It could be your boss's boss, which by the way, we hired Tolly's boss's boss. It could be somebody who doesn't have the qualifications. It could be somebody who you just remember the messages that they were sending on Telegram, and you get the sense that they might have some raw skill that somehow might fit in here, and you're not even sure how. But I think that intuition is really important, and a lot of people completely ignore that. They only start really thinking about who they want for the role once they've put a job rec together and they've decided through consensus with the rest of the team, how they want to grow the team. For me, it starts with individual people that come to mind. And one of the stories I tell a lot is like, so I used to be in the same office space as Tolly and a couple of the other engineers that were, working through some of the hard early decisions. And I just remember hearing the words a few times, I wonder what Vines thinks of this or would think of this. There was somebody from their past. It was Michael Vines, and that was Tolly's boss's boss at Qualcomm. He was a senior director there when Tolly was, more hands-on, working on VR and the core kernel for Brew and different things like that. And I remember asking, like, who is this person? It sounds like somebody we should have in the team. And this is the part that really gets me going. The answer was just like, oh, we couldn't hire him. There's no way. And without speaking specific about him, I think it was always about money or the person's spouse. Like, this is not about Michael Vines specifically, but it was either, they were making so much money that there's no way we could get them to turn away that salary, or what we were doing was too risky and they really wanted to take that risk, but the other decision makers in their life would just always stonewall them and say, not now, maybe later. And I think like getting past, really the money thing never is the real objection. It's like getting to the spouse, actually speaking with them, getting deep with them and understanding like what their relationship with money is, to keep them in this like handcuffed position where they're working a job that they don't enjoy, not taking the risks they want to take, not working with the people that they want to work with, over, a number. I just love doing that. Like, that's my favorite thing in the world, because it's the returns are so incredibly compounding. Like the first, 5 or 10 people that you hire the next, 10 or 20, they hire the next 100, and that's the company. Like, that's it, where it's like pointing a rocket. It's like, a few millimeters makes a big difference of where you end up. And so, to me, I think that's just the highest leverage work. And I think really overshooting aggressively is something I don't see enough teams do. And, I feel like that's a part of Solana culture. Like, I see people like, Mert, I know people that you work on for years to come build on Solana and start companies here. People at Solana Foundation do it. Other founders do it. Everybody in Solana that is really putting their life's energy towards this network has like a bench of 5 or 10 people that they've just been chipping away at for, like a year to come build here. And that's the other component. Like none of this stuff ever happened fast. It always took 6 months to a year. And I'm still finding that, we're getting people to join the mission that I just thought were impossible to get. And it's been a year, and sure enough, I just hear about them switching teams, getting a new job, like, joining the ecosystem.
Yeah. If Raj starts speaking to your spouse, you might be about to get a job offer, it sounds like. I'm curious to ask about the relationship between you and Anatoly, because you speak about him very positively. And I guess the sort of maybe unique decision you guys took is you decided to go like one technical co-founder, one non-technical co-founder. And I think the way you've characterized this is Anatoly just really focused on building the Solana blockchain, and you took care of everything else. Let me talk to investors. Let me build the website. Let me speak with regulators or whatever needed to be done. Just looking back on that for like founders who may be listening or something, what were sort of the pros and the cons of doing like a one technical, one non-technical co-founder relationship as opposed to both founders being technical, which I think you see a good bit as well in crypto?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the pros, and just to be clear too, it wasn't just me and Anatoly, right? There were other co-founders. They were all technical, and they all were in a really tight knit engineering team. I was the only non-technical co-founder, and I think having as many engineers to non-engineers as you can muster, as long as the engineering team works really effectively together and they know what to focus on and they know what to build, is pretty important, because non-engineers can get bored, and they can start spinning wheels, and they can start trying to convince the engineering team of what it needs to do, and every minute that's spent talking is time not coding. And that's the number one indicator of acceleration for a startup, is just like how much code and how fast it ships. Yeah, I mean, I've always viewed myself that way, as part of product teams, engineering teams. It's about getting engineers out of meetings and into code, out of product requirements and into code, out of design and into code. Or if they have a proclivity to taking on any of those functions as a means of writing better code, like that's where you really bring them in, and have it be more of a pull than a push. So, I think for us that worked pretty well. And yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of teams that are, that almost overcorrect, and they have, all engineers as founders, they never have that one person that's really just trying to, get everyone out of the bullshit and into building. And sometimes that can end up like kind of diffusing the responsibility across a bunch of people that are doing, lower level work than they have to, and it just slows them down.
Raj, you've been involved in previous startups before Solana, and you're also invested in quite a few. I'm not quite sure if you could classify Solana as a startup at this point, but perhaps learnings are the same. One thing that perplexes me is the differences of building a startup as a regular company versus building an ecosystem around the blockchain. Something that Austin will say, for example, who's the head of strategy at Solana Foundation, is marketing is quite different for a blockchain, because it's like, how do you market a city, right? It's not like marketing a product. What are some of the challenges or like the biggest differences between the two? And perhaps that can tie into potential founders that will be building in crypto in the future that look to differentiate between building, let's say, an infra company like Helios, which is more of an equity type business, versus something that's a decentralized network.
Every analogy kind of breaks down at some point, but the city analogy is pretty good. And I think one piece people don't often focus on is like what is the equivalent of location uh, for a blockchain versus a city? Like, cities, the primary determinant of their success, their geography, how they build out, where people concentrate, where they don't, is like, where is that city? Is it by a river? Is it in the desert? I mean, Las Vegas looks very different, and its entire history is shaped by the fact that it was, started as an oasis in the desert, versus Manhattan, that's between two rivers, and really completely flat, and optimized for ports and commerce. So I think this is why, like, the most important facet of our blockchain city is performance. The belief is that everything that is great about a shared financial state machine, or whatever you want to think of them as, is downstream of how performant that thing can be, while geographically distributed and permissionless. So I think having some truth like that is very differentiated, and then finding the organic ways that it attracts and grows people is like the act of marketing the thing. But it doesn't often look like traditional marketing, and because the most critical audience for that quote unquote marketing is developers, and developers hate being marketed to. They don't click ads, that tell them what's a good product to develop on. They read docs. They talk to their friends. They see what products they admire that are already using these resources. They make technical decisions, and kind of actively avoid being persuaded based on talking points, or something subjective. So yeah, I mean, I think what that's meant for Solana from the early days, and for other open source blockchain projects. To me, the most important thing is like aggressive differentiation at the product and architecture level. And Tolly sometimes says we're I forget exactly how he says it, but basically we're not going to see another 10x in performance, that's unlocked from a different architecture than what Solana has. Like, we really, it's like broadband to dial up. Like, this is the step function change. We brought it to market, and everyone else can copy, but there will never be another Manhattan that's positioned exactly as this network is. So I think from there, the focus is just getting to results and what's happening in the real world as fast as possible. Like, we never wanted to be focused on opinions of what people think about a white paper. We wanted to show real performance, real metrics, on a real mainnet instance. And then as fast as we could, we just wanted to tell case studies and stories of what was being built on the network. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's like, I think marketing is like this constantly changing function for the network, and just like anything else, the best way to market is through word of mouth from people already using it.
Speaking about Solana, like a little monolithically, but I would think that the substance of kind of what you do with Solana changed a good bit when the Solana Foundation was spun out and Solana Labs was no longer like building the Solana blockchain. It was building these products like Solana Mobile that use Solana's technology. So I'm sort of curious just what you do day to day now. And do you have a bit of nostalgia for the earlier days when you were more hands on with the network, or do you kind of prefer the way things are now?
I definitely miss the early days. I felt like I always had one major thing to focus on at a time in the early days, because uh, the number one variable that determined the top of my task list was like, what could kill the network, what could destroy all of our work, and send us home with our head in our hands, because we messed up, or somebody messed up, and the network is dead. So I just don't. Yeah, we don't really have those existential issues anymore. In mid 2022, I thought we were getting there, and I started to feel a little, more at ease. And then, the rest of 2022 happened. But yeah, I think we're a long way from there now. And so my day to day these days is mostly meeting with founders, that are building on the network, problem solving and crisis managing with the people who use the network. So, and there's, no shortage of crises for folks building in the app layer. And then the other side is, there are really big institutions and enterprises that want to use the network, and they like to talk to the people that founded it, and the folks on the board of the foundation. So that's where I spend most of my time.
Well, so to frame this question, Solana has a lot of hackathons, and it has super team, it has bounties, it has a lot of technical talent, and let's say a lot of aspiring Anatolis in a sense. And as an angel investor myself, I often find myself, let's say, wondering where they're falling short because they're super technically focused, but perhaps not so much on the non-technical things. And so perhaps they need a Raj. And so assume you're this grandfatherly Raj figure to all these technical founders coming up. What is some advice you can give them? What mistakes have you seen that you think can be fixed going forward?
Hmm. I think there's a time and place for for paying attention to just the endless stream of crypto narratives out there. Um, I think when you decide on the project, and you name the project, and you put your identity out into the world, it needs to have some contextual relationship to, like, uh, the common parlance we have for products that are built in crypto. And so, like, looking out at the map, getting glued to Twitter, familiarizing yourself with the history of crypto, and then saying this is where we sit within it, is important in that moment. I think it in between that and launch, there's not a ton of reason to spend a lot of your time in that place. Or if you're going to do it, relegate that to one person. Like, it's like a drug. You don't want everyone addicted to it. So I guess the meta lesson here is just like, I think as a CEO, as a project leader, being really conscious about where you let the crypto ADD mindset seep into your product team, and your culture and your company is really important, because it is like tapping into the hive mind. I think crypto is a very mimetic, and it's an industry that's full of lemmings, and you can catch something really big if you time it well. But there's also something to be said for just shutting out all the outside noise, and building towards something that you have a lot of conviction in, and only reemerging when it's done. So yeah, I mean, I think crypto still lives on Twitter, and sometimes this boils down to just like allocating your time on Twitter very consciously, and doing it in bursts in the important moments.
This may be too meta of a question for right now, but just broad strokes as far as your career. Is there a world in which you step back in a more day-to-day way with the operation of Solana, maybe especially in a world where there's not as much regulatory risk involved with being associated with the blockchain itself? Or B, is there a world in which you kind of step away and strike out into a new venture? Like, what are the big strokes as far as how you view where things are headed for you now, a number of years into this kind of Solana journey you've been on?
I think blockchains are definitely weird relative to companies. We don't have a lot of history of I mean, Satoshi's probably dead, right? And like Bitcoin's the largest project. So I think a lot of the times it's arguably better if the founders and the founding orgs really, just fade into irrelevance and disappear. I think it probably makes sense, when all the existential risks are out of the way. So yeah, I would love to just like have nothing to do with Solana at some point, but I think it's going to be hard because at that point, I would probably be building products on top of the network. Um, and honestly, I just think there's a point where Solana touches everything because everything is finance, and Solana is a global financial state machine. So the thing, one of the things that I'm really excited about is like startup capital markets. The same way that you wouldn't call a startup like an internet startup anymore. They're just startups. They're tech startups. They're product companies. I think at some point, you wouldn't say that a company was financed or born in the like internet capital markets of crypto. You just say it's a company. Um, and I think the companies that benefit most uh, from internet native capital markets are the ones that I'm going to be most interested in through the rest of my career, because I still think people just have no idea that they're coming. DePIN is an example of this. Like, physical infrastructure networks that get built that couldn't exist without crypto capital markets and digital assets are just like this tiny little bubble of I think what's to come. Um, and there are other examples, but I kind of sound like a crazy person when I talk about them.
What kind of founder do you think should pick Solana?
I think founders who are ambitious and crazy enough to think that their product is likely to have hundreds of millions of users, or be at the equivalent scale if they're not a user facing product. Like that's who Solana is targeting. It's the builders that want a predictable path to scale and as minimal platform risk as possible while achieving that scale in a way that actually needs to use a blockchain and actually needs performance. So I think there's a really good self-selection mechanism. Those tend to be the types of founders that look past noise. They are not easily convinced by surface level arguments. They don't just follow conventional wisdom. They certainly don't make technical decisions based on what their VCs tell them. Um, you know, First principles. Engineers that are also not afraid to go lower level and you know rewrite compilers if they need to ship their product. I think that's probably going to be a consistent part of Solana engineering culture for a while.
And assume we have this next cohort of founders who fit that model. And you are obviously a seasoned startup founder as well. What's the number one lesson you've learned that you think would be valuable for them?
Setting a vision that you can infinitely progress toward without actually accomplishing it is really important. Um, I think it's the difference between why Google continues to innovate. Obviously, they're at a stage in their life cycle where they're facing real stiff competition from AI companies for the first time. But the idea of like organizing the world's information is a mission and a vision that just it never gets done. There's always more information to organize, and it gives you infinite design space for how to move your way towards that vision. And it's very ambitious. It's species level. Um, I would compare that to a company like Dropbox, where it never really seemed like they had much of a vision beyond seamless file sharing across platforms. And when they achieved it, they sort of ran out of big swings to take. So I think it's really important, and it's an important It's an important way to make sure that you don't have problems of success that often keep teams from realizing their potential and keeping momentum up. Which I would say is maybe like a bigger problem to think about, because you could spend 10 years having great success and then completely lose your way. And I think that's actually a worse outcome than just failing at the outset and finding a much bigger rocket ship that you were meant to be a part of down the road.
Cool. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. But thank you so much to Raj for coming on. It's been a blast, and we will catch you all on the next one.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.